You are 26 years old. You have a graduate degree you barely mention. You have 3 years of something else in your background that you mention even less. You answered a posting that wasn't quite a posting. You filled out a form that went 47 pages, questions about finances, about family, about loyalties and old secrets, and the worst thing you've ever done. You answered all of them, you passed. Now you're here. The facility has no sign. The address is a post office box. You drive to a gate and a guard looks through you before he looks at your credentials. He waves you through without smiling. Nobody here smiles. This is Camp Peary. You will not say that name out loud again. Your class has 22 people. You don't know their real names. You won't. You've been assigned a training alias. You use it when you sign documents. You use it when instructors call on you in class. After 3 weeks, you stop thinking of it as false. That's by design. They want the name to sit naturally in your mouth. It does. That should concern you more than it does. The training isn't what you imagined. No gadgets, no briefings in glass towers with city views. There are classrooms. There are manuals. There's a library with materials you can't remove from the building. You read about tradecraft, surveillance detection routes, asset recruitment, the psychology of deception. You read until your eyes ache, and then you go do it. They send you into a shopping mall. An instructor is somewhere inside. Your job is to follow him without being burned. You lose him near a food court. You spend 40 minutes trying to pick up the trail again. In the debrief, he walks you through every mistake, every wrong turn, every moment your eyes went where they shouldn't. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. You fail that exercise. You fail 2 more that week. Failure here isn't exceptional. It's the curriculum. What they're measuring isn't whether you succeed, it's what you do when you don't, how you carry it, whether it changes you the right way or the wrong way. They watch for signs of brittleness, signs of denial. The person who can't accept instruction is finished before they start. The person who accepts everything without integrating it is equally finished. You're learning to move between those boundaries as the balance is narrower than you'd think. The most important test isn't physical, it's the room with no windows. An instructor sits across from you. He asks questions about your cover identity. You answer. He rephrases. You hold the line. He leans back and writes something in a notepad. He doesn't tell you what. You leave without knowing if you passed. That feeling becomes permanent. You might as well get used to it now. You've been assigned. The posting letter says one city. The actual destination says another. You land somewhere you can locate on a map but have never visited. The embassy looks like every government building you've ever seen. Concrete, reinforced glass, a flag that moves in whatever wind there is. Guards who look at your credentials without looking at your face. Your cover is diplomatic, commercial attaché. Your business cards list a title that means nothing and a section that doesn't appear in the public directory. You attend the right meetings, you file the reports that justify your cover. You do the actual administrative work of a commercial attaché, so there's no gap for watchers to notice. The cover isn't decorative. It's structural. It holds everything else up. The real job is the city. You walk its streets with a purpose that looks like no purpose at all. You sit in cafes and read and observe. You learn which parked vehicles don't belong to the street. You identify the surveillance assets the host government runs against foreign diplomats. The man who reads a newspaper too slowly near the main entrance. The woman at the corner bakery whose phone is always angled wrong. You clock them and keep walking. You don't alter your pace. You don't look back. You catalog their patterns and their rotations. You note which ones appear when you take different routes. Some of them will be hostile services trying to identify your network. Some will be routine counterintelligence. You can't know which is which from the street level. You report everything back to the station. The analysts separate the significant from the routine. You trust that process because you have to. Your first actual assignment is a mid-level official in the local finance ministry. He has access to information your government wants. He hasn't been approached before. Nobody knows if he can be turned. Your job is to find out without making the wrong move first. You engineer a meeting at a trade conference. The introduction comes through a third party who doesn't know he's a third party. The official shakes your hand. You give him your alias name. You discuss regional trade policy for 20 minutes. You prepared that conversation for 30 hours. He finds you interesting. He suggests dinner. You go. You listen more than you speak. You build the map of who he is, what he values, what he resents about his position, what his government isn't giving him, what he wants that isn't available through official channels. This takes 4 months. 4 months of dinners and incidental meetings and phone calls about nothing. You send weekly cables back to headquarters, asset development ongoing, no approach yet. Headquarters sends questions, you answer them carefully, you don't rush. Rushing is how people get burned. You think about his family sometimes, you know about them from casual conversation, a daughter in university, a wife who works in education. They're real people, and you're building a case against him. That's the work. You don't let it change your actions, but you don't forget it either. He said yes. Not in those words. It's never in those words. He said he thought there might be ways he could be useful. He said he'd need to be careful. You told him careful was exactly right. You gave him a number to memorize. You told him to destroy everything written. He nodded and looked at the table between you for a moment. Then he looked up. The decision was already made before he said anything. You have an asset. His operational file starts at 12 pages. It'll exceed 400 before you leave this posting. You run him the way you were trained. Dead drops in locations you rotate every month. Brief meetings in the back rooms of restaurants chosen for their sightlines and ambient noise. A signal system using a specific parking space and a chalk mark on a concrete pillar that tells him whether a meeting is safe to proceed. You vary the restaurants and the timing. You study the staff. You position yourself where you can see exits. You're looking for evidence that the location has been surveilled or compromised. Every time you visit a location for the first time in a new cycle, you arrive early. You walk the perimeter. You test the sightlines yourself. He passes you documents, financial transfers, procurement records, budget allocations that your analysts use to map his government's real priorities against its public ones. Some of its information headquarters already has through other channels. You never tell him which is which. Knowing what you value most would teach him how to control what he gives you. The documents appear in a way that maintains operational security. Sometimes they're photographs taken with a camera that looks like a lighter. Sometimes they're files on a thumb drive he drops in a book at a dead drop location. Sometimes they're just information he passes verbally and you commit to memory. Every meeting ends the same way. You assess his demeanor, his stress levels, any change in behavior or appearance that suggests he's been internally flagged. You report every detail in cables classified at the highest level your station produces. His identity is protected by a cryptonym that only a small number of cleared personnel can see. You review his file before each meeting and again afterward. You're looking for drift, inconsistency, the small things. You worry about him in the clinical way the job teaches you to worry. If he's arrested, the mission fails. If he's arrested and talks, the damage extends beyond him and beyond your station. You think about this in your apartment in the foreign city where no one knows your real job and the walls are thin and the street outside never fully goes quiet. You think about it when you see a police car, when your phone rings late, when there's a knock on your door that you're not expecting. You make $72,000 a year, housing is covered, cover expenses are reimbursed, it's a government salary, it's not wealth. It's a kind of permanence in a life that doesn't allow much of it. That distinction matters differently to different people. For you, it's enough. For now, it's enough. 11 years in, you have 8 active assets across 3 countries. You don't run them all directly anymore. 2 junior officers handle the street-level contact. You review their cables. You approve their operational plans. You redirect them when they're moving wrong, and sometimes you let them make a small mistake so they understand why you're redirecting them in the first place. The early urgency has compressed into something more efficient. You know what works. More importantly, you know what looks like it works but doesn't. You know the difference between an asset genuinely producing intelligence and one feeding you material that's been carefully selected to mislead. That distinction took years to develop. It doesn't come from a classroom. It comes from being wrong once in a way that stayed with you. You've learned to separate the intelligence that flatters your assumptions from the intelligence that challenges them. You've learned that the most dangerous assets are the ones telling you what you wanted to hear. You've learned to ask the questions that make people uncomfortable because uncomfortable answers are often true. You were burned once, not catastrophically. A junior officer moved too fast on a contact who turned out to be a double. Nothing classified was compromised at a critical level. The relationship ended cleanly. The review board found no misconduct. But you carried it. You still do. That's the weight the job applies and doesn't remove. You're meticulous with your junior officers now. You review their surveillance detection routes before every meeting. You ask the questions they haven't thought to ask themselves yet. Why does the asset want to meet this particular week when his access hasn't changed? Why is he initiating contact rather than responding to yours? What's different? Small things. The job trains you to read small things. You've been passed over for station chief once. The official explanation was timing. An open position in a smaller station, a candidate with more administrative experience. You accepted the explanation. You didn't believe all of it. You kept working. The promotion or its absence doesn't change the work in front of you. That's either wisdom or resignation. You've stopped trying to tell the difference. Your personal life is difficult to summarize. You're married. Your spouse understands the shape of what you do, not the specifics. Not the cryptonyms or the countries or what the chalk mark on the concrete pillar means or why you replace your phone every 2 weeks. They know the outline. For some marriages, the outline is enough. You miss things. Dinners that were planned. An anniversary that fell during an operational window you couldn't move. Your spouse has adapted to this. That's not sacrifice. That's the contract you both signed when you decided this marriage could exist alongside this job. 42 personnel. 3 divisions: operational, analytical, administrative. You're responsible for all of it. The intelligence your station produces, the security of your people, the liaison relationships with the host country's own services, which require constant maintenance and constant wariness in almost equal measure. You brief the ambassador weekly. She's politically appointed and operationally sharp, and her priorities don't always align with headquarters collection requirements. You manage that gap carefully. You give her what she needs to do her job. You protect the operation she doesn't need to know about. You don't tell her everything. That's not obstruction. That's the architecture of how this works, and she understands it even when she pushes. The hardest part of this job isn't the operations. It's the personnel. You have 42 people, and each of them is a human being with stress points and personal situations that affect professional performance in ways you can't always predict. A junior officer whose marriage is collapsing and whose judgment in the field has become unreliable. An analyst who's brilliant and can't maintain operational security in social settings. A senior case officer who's right about almost everything and nearly impossible to manage. You need all of them. You need them to function at a level that matters. You need them to be professional on days when their personal lives are falling apart. That's not cruelty. That's the job. That's what you signed up to manage when you accepted this position. You make the calls on all of it: who gets the good assignment, who gets the formal performance review, who you recommend for promotion, and who you recommend for reassignment back to headquarters. Those recommendations follow careers for decades. You write them with precision. Every word is chosen. An asset is arrested, not one of yours directly, a liaison service asset your station has been quietly coordinating with for 14 months. The arrest is sudden. The exposure is uncertain. You spend 72 hours on almost no sleep. You're coordinating with headquarters. You're running damage assessment. You're deciding which operations go dark immediately and which can continue under adjusted security protocols. Nobody panics. You don't let them panic. That's most of what a station chief does in a crisis. Hold the temperature down and keep people thinking. The crisis resolves. You file the after-action report. You debrief your team. You go home to the residence your position provides and sit in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that's gone cold. You look at a wall that could be any wall in any city over the last 20 years of your life. You're 51 years old. You've been in 34 countries. You speak 4 languages fluently and 2 well enough to manage. You've never fired a weapon outside of a range. You've never been in a physical confrontation that mattered. The job is not what it looked like from outside. It was never that. You're back in Virginia, probably for good. The field is behind you and the building is in front of you, and the building is where this ends. Your office is on a floor with a view of the woods. The windows are thick. The room has a specific quiet that reinforced rooms have. You have a staff of 9 people whose job is to manage the flow of information to and from you. You have a secure line with direct access to the National Security Council. You have a car and a driver and a security detail that you find necessary and intrusive in about equal measure. You oversee clandestine operations in every region of the world. Some you inherited and don't fully trust. Some are running right now on decisions made years before you held this position by people who no longer work here. You own the outcomes regardless. That's what this desk means. The outcomes belong to whoever's sitting here. You review operational cables that come in overnight. Officers in cities you've worked in sending updates on assets you helped develop years ago. The world keeps turning. The operations keep running. You're the custodian of all of it now. The budget you manage appears in no public document. The decisions you make about how it's allocated shape events in countries most Americans won't visit and won't hear about in any accurate way. You make those decisions in meetings with cleared principles in a room where personal devices aren't permitted. You make them after reviewing intelligence that represents the collective effort of thousands of people working across years and multiple services. Every dollar spent has an operation attached to it. Every operation has a human being running it in a foreign city. You carry that weight into these meetings. You testify before congressional oversight committees, closed sessions, cleared members only. Some of them are serious and well prepared. Some of them are performing for an audience that isn't in the room. You answer all of them the same way, measured, precise. You offer what you must and protect what you can. That's the full range of motion available to you in those sessions. The bureaucracy at this level is enormous. Every significant operational decision passes through legal review, policy review, in some cases a presidential finding, a memorandum, a signature trail that exists for oversight purposes and can't be shortened. Operations that a station chief could authorize in 48 hours take 6 weeks at this level. The slowness is deliberate. The oversight is real. That doesn't make it less frustrating on the days when speed is the difference between success and failure. When you travel now, it's to brief allied services or receive briefings from them. You sit across narrow tables from your counterparts in foreign intelligence organizations and conduct negotiations that will appear in no public record. You make agreements that your respective governments will honor without formally acknowledging. The language is exact. The trust is genuine and conditional and renewed with every exchange that goes the way it should. You've had exchanges that didn't. Those stay with you differently. Senate confirmation took 4 months. Your name appeared in newspapers in ways you'd spent a career avoiding. Your history was reviewed in public in a way that felt like dissection in a room you couldn't leave. Senators asked questions about operations they'd been briefed on and were now using as leverage. You answered what you could answer. You declined what you couldn't. You were confirmed. The margin told you exactly how political the moment was and exactly how political the job ahead would be. You briefed the president. You sit in the Oval Office in the chair to the left of the National Security Advisor. You deliver assessments that carry the institutional weight of thousands of analysts and officers and sources who will never be in this room and whose names will never appear in what you're about to say. You speak without overstatement. The intelligence community has been wrong before in ways that reshaped history. You hold that record in this room every time you open a briefing book. The pressure to shade the picture is constant, not always explicit. Sometimes it's a question asked a second time in a particular tone. Sometimes it's a comment about what analysts missed previously, framed as a reminder. You don't bend the assessment. Some days that's the entire job. Not the operations, not the policy questions, just holding the line on what the evidence actually says versus what the room already wants to believe. The decisions at this level aren't operational the way they were when you ran assets in foreign cities. They're strategic. Intelligence is one input among many. Policy and military capability and economic pressure and political reality are all in the room with you. Your function is to make sure the intelligence picture is accurate. You give your assessment. The decisions belong to others. That's the structure, and you understood it before you took the oath. You've been in this position for 18 months. 3 significant crises have moved through this office since you arrived. None had clean resolutions. None of the intelligence was perfect, and none of the decisions were obvious. You gave your assessments. The process took it from there. That's either the correct design or it's the thing that makes this job impossible, depending on the week. Your security detail plans your movements in advance. You've adapted to this. You sleep. You exercise. You read intelligence products at 5 a.m. with coffee that's always fresh because someone whose job is to provide it has been awake longer than you have. The schedule belongs to the office more than it belongs to you. That's been true for a long time now, just at different scales. You think about the gate at Camp Peary sometimes. The guard who looked through you before he looked at your credentials. The classroom with no windows. The asset in the finance ministry who looked at the table and then looked up. The junior officers you supervised in postings you can't name in this building. The crisis that ran 72 hours. The Senate hearing where a senator used a classified operation as a political prop, and you gave him exactly the answer you were permitted to give and not a syllable beyond it. Every alias you carried. Every cable you wrote in a city where your name was something different printed on a business card that didn't belong to you. Every decision made in rooms that don't appear in records that anyone without a clearance will ever read. The line runs from that first gate all the way to this chair. It's a single unbroken line. You can trace every point on it. You're the only one who can.